Well, welcome everybody. My name is Joe Casey, the County Administrator of Chesterfield County. This is the annual exercise that a local government goes through in the presentation of the County Administrator's budget to the elected officials for them to discern over the course of the next month. There'll be many community meetings. There'll be a public hearing on this proposed budget. It is just that. It's just a proposal of what we think as administration, as staff, as myself, as far as how to best allocate our finite resources of taxes and other revenues to leverage them for the greater good of Chesterfield County residents and businesses. This is just an example of just how we are trying to position ourselves with the economy that we have here before us, and what we're trying to do in recognizing the efficiencies we have, the effectiveness to deploy. So I'm just going to go through a couple of topics that we have here. First off, for those that don't know, Chesterfield County has a long-standing, coveted AAA bond rating for the county side of the operation and the utility side of the operation. There are very few localities in all of the country that have such ratings. That is really a designated seal, if you will, of approval of our fiscal stewardship and our mindfulness to the people, and again, leveraging their taxes, their precious taxes, for a quality place to live, work, learn, and play. Our tagline in Chesterfield County, I came here actually, part of it is because it's a first choice community. And again, over the last 4 years or so during my tenure, I've come to actually believe that those words mean something. When they were first created many years ago, they may have been just words, but I actually think that the mindset of the people of Chesterfield County, the mindset of the elected officials, the mindset of the employees is a first choice community. Having said that, we must not stand still and rest on the laurels of that first choice community. We have to continually move forward. We have to continually evaluate, use best practices, modify our operations, adjust our services to the ever-changing community that's around us, the more diverse community, the more aging community, quite frankly, the more young community. So all of those facets are changing all the time. How we do that, we have to be creative, we have to be diligent, we have to be innovative, we have to allocate finite resources, and we must be responsive to the citizens and business needs of the community, especially in our two priority areas of schools and public safety. Infrastructure is a very important trait as well. The economic conditions of the local government are no different than maybe the state nor the national government. We're benefiting, again, from a 10-year cycle, if you will, of good growth, low unemployment, and other types of economic factors. That growth in Chesterfield County, the assessed value growth, the tax-based growth, is again where we get our precious revenues from. Having said that, with such growth in the revenues, we are also being mindful of the tax rate. We are keeping the real estate property tax rate at its current 95 cents. We have to be competitive in attracting businesses, retaining businesses. We also have to be very mindful that a tax rate, a tax bill, is again a large bill for many of our residents, who, especially those that are on fixed incomes, those that may be renting places for which again their rent may go up because of higher taxes. So while the revenue growth is critical for necessary services, it's also critical for us to be mindful of the affordability of what it takes to live and work in Chesterfield County. I'll first start off with schools. That has been the predominant topic over the last month or so, and it's designed to be that way. A superintendent releases his proposed budget, and again, Merv Doherty is a personal friend of mine, and I work and talk with him quite often. Matt Harris, to my right here, is a Deputy County Administrator, has a counterpart over there, Deputy and Superintendent Dr. Thomas Taylor. Again, they have continuously worked over the course, not just the last month, quite frankly, over the last 6 months to a year since the last budget's been developed, to again position ourselves for those finite resources to be deployed. I respect the fact that Dr. Doherty had to go through a needs-based budget exercise. He had to present that to a new school board to kind of lay out all the variables that they may be facing today and tomorrow. While it was an excitable exercise that they went through, it was never designed to necessarily be a year one funding exercise. Our tax rates could not necessarily support anything of that magnitude. But having said that, though, it lent us to a lot of different questions, a lot of different priorities, and us working together, working with the state, quite frankly, about how we can pull out, if you will, key initiatives that they have, and also put out into our 5-year financial plan, which we have long established, long held, dear to us, being included for future initiatives of the schools and how to position them as such. The end result was a school budget that was $55 million higher than last year. That is the largest increase in the history of Chesterfield County that I'm aware of. And the percentage increase is actually one of the largest percentage increases as far as any element of our budget. That increase covers lots of new state mandates. With state mandates comes state services that we have to provide, but it also enables some local initiatives to be done. We are going to continue to work with the schools throughout this process, quite frankly, throughout the summer, and again, perfecting our 5-year financial plan exercise to understand what are all those other initiatives that were not funded, what were all those other needs, quote unquote, that were not funded, to see what we can also fit within the 5-year window. So we respect the challenges that the school has and the many students that they serve. We also are mindful that those same students that they have challenges with in serving at higher cost than maybe an average student, those students are also our citizens. Those students live in households for which we serve also. Those households may have friends and families that come and visit that we also serve. And that service for us is 24/7, 365. There has been much discussion on the teacher salary scales and pay and compression. And again, my wife, my mother, my sister are all teachers. I was actually an adjunct professor prior to coming to Chesterfield County as a part-time job. The funding of a teacher is not just a local Chesterfield topic or what the appropriate funding should be. That's a regional topic, that's a state topic, that's a national topic. We need to value the teachers. We need to fund them accordingly to the value that they bring in making a difference in a child's life. We all, and when I say all levels of government have a certain responsibility to best meet our commitment to doing that. Having said that, the federal government's role is very little to none, if you will, on funding a teacher's salary. The state's role is becoming less and less every year, and I think we're down below 50% as far as their role. So what once was a predominant partner in funding a teacher's salary is becoming less and less as they go along because their salary scales, their models, what they think a class size should be, are not the service standards that we think exist and should exist in Chesterfield County. So over the course of the prior 2 months, again, many statistics have been heard throughout the community. All I can say is, we are glad to fact check. We are glad to research any statistic. We're glad to work with our school counterparts to understand the source data for certain statistics. But again, what we are going to try and talk about is just the facts that are in this budget, what is in it and what is not. So traditionally, our commitment to the school board budget has been very consistent to our regional competitive peers. Those competitive peers are Hanover and Henrico, 2 localities that I worked with, 2 localities, quite frankly, when I worked with, Chesterfield was their competitive peer. So those 3 localities have a lot of the same DNA. We have very similar teacher salary scales. We have many similar teacher pay practices. And again, I think we're all going to try and work to recognize the increased value of the teacher over their career. We're going to continue to work to advocate to our state delegation. And when I say we, I'd like to get Hanover and Henrico also involved in such legislative activity. Again, as far as what the state's role with those funds are. I would really even try to see if we can get our teachers' salary scales aligned properly. So we're all talking about the same thing. We're all talking about the value of a teacher and what they bring to the classroom. So again, the county and schools, having said that, we have teamed together to do a compensation study for the teachers. That study was just approved at the last board meeting for $100,000. I'm proud to note that we have actually narrowed down a short list of vendors under some cooperative agreements that other localities have done in the past, and we're hopeful to interview such firms next week. This county and school exercise means that we both own this topic. We're both responsible for hopefully funding the topic and making it a priority in both of our budgets going forward. Part of thinking about this topic, and I'm only talking a little bit longer about this one because it was such a highlighted topic over the last month, this lends ourselves also to think what are innovative practices out there to show the value of a teacher, to reduce their out-of-pocket costs for classroom supplies and other things that they incur in perfecting their education and their classroom. What is the role of Chesterfield Education Foundation? It's a nonprofit organization of businesses. How we can help position them to raise more funds, more monies, so they can get monies back into the classroom, perhaps actually back into a teacher's paycheck. What are other roles that we can play, similar to what we do with our police officers? For those that don't know, our police are contracted off-duty to work for the private sector at about $32 an hour. That helps supplement a police officer salary after their full-time job, after their shifts. Again, is there potential for teachers through tutoring or other skills that they may have that we could further deploy? Could we use them in our libraries and our park programs? again, let's have those fresh conversations because, again, if I can find a tutoring job for $50 an hour for 200 hours during the summer breaks or winter or spring break, that's $10,000 more per year per teacher. Not saying that's the answer, I'm just saying that's an example of an innovative practice that we can do. So having said all that, another collaborative activity that we're going to be working with the schools on further, and I'm really just proud as a teammate to be witnessing two departments that really are dealing with many of the same types of challenges, and that's our social services department and our schools. And this particular topic deals with residency requirements. A byproduct of an all-accredited school system is that it becomes a destination where parents want to send a child. Many of those parents that live outside the area, they move here for that education. Many people are relocating to this area to choose Chesterfield for their child to go to school. So unfortunately, though, some don't necessarily follow the rules and try and get their children in our school system otherwise. The schools are overwhelmed, quite frankly, with I think just 2 people assigned to that task. This particular budget doubles that force, really puts it really as a county team, if you will, of social services and the schools. There's many laws that the powers of social services has that can supplement the schools, again, to best position our school system to be for the residents of Chesterfield County. As an example, for every 200 students that may be in our schools that do not have the residency requirement to be there, it's an annual cost to our school system of over $1 million. That's a significant budget constraint to the schools. Pivoting to the other priority of our areas, public safety. The theme for public safety is maximizing our current resources. The budget supports those who serve on the front lines by providing full funding for career development programs. These programs recognize the time and attention, education, and training that certain people in those professions do, police, firefighters, sheriff deputies, in bettering themselves, making themselves more valuable to the community, to the citizens, and to the businesses, making themselves, quite frankly, more valuable in being a mentor to others in their organization. We have worked hard over the last few years to try and position all of those divisions to have strong career development programs, to retain talent, and recruit as well. So the budget also, maximizing its resource, is we're beginning an initiative of trying to recognize some tasks that are done in those professions that are really more suitable for a civilian. If you think about it, all the efforts of training that an individual goes through to be a sworn officer are quite extensive. And again, if there are civilian tasks that can be done at a cheaper hourly rate, then those resources can be deployed for the community-oriented priorities that otherwise exist. In addition, this budget also makes a strategic investment in our fire and EMS division. The department mandates overtime right now to people so it could have adequate coverage on its fire trucks and ambulances. Again, that's for safety, that's for a best standard protocol. So if you don't have enough personnel, you have to make other people work overtime to have the full complement. What we have done in this budget is 2 things. One is we have increased the overtime budget, which was one of our most pressing over budget areas of the last few years. But 2, we are actually providing additional resources in the budget. This particular budget has 12 positions devoted, if you will, to mitigating the overtime impact, and our 5-year plan has 6 additional positions each and every year to further mitigate the overtime impact. It goes without saying, anyone who's mandated to do overtime, it can lend to morale issues, it can lend to burnout, and we don't want either of them with our precious firefighters. For the sheriff's office, what we're focusing on that particular topic is how to leverage our existing jail capacity to really help in the reallocation of perhaps 100 inmates away from Riverside Regional Jail. You don't have to go too far to hear about all the news of Riverside Regional Jail, the Department of Corrections probationary status that it's under right now. I myself attended a jail board meeting in the last month just to observe them. And the standard of care of the inmates there is not at the par that the standard of care that Sheriff Leonard does at his home facility right here. Sheriff Leonard has to make very hard decisions each and every day of who stays here at his facility and who goes to Riverside Regional Jail. That's not fair for anybody. It's not fair for a family of an inmate. It's not fair to the inmate themselves. So until Riverside Regional Jail can get its standards of care up to the standards, quite frankly, of DOC, and possibly even get close to the standards of Chesterfield Jail, we want to maximize our capacity here. We can do that through economies of scale also and save actually up to close to $500,000 with that realignment. And we are going to continue to be mindful of those inmates at Riverside and even seek other alternative arrangements if Riverside Regional Jail cannot get its act together. As far as the employee and workforce, one of the consequences of a low unemployment environment, it challenges us in attracting and retaining good employees. The budget does include a modest 2% increase, hopefully for all employees, counties and schools, to hopefully deal with inflationary increases in their lives. And it does generally align with the regional competitive peers in the marketplace. As I noted before, through our career development programs, with our pay studies of the teacher pay study, as well as the public safety pay study, we are recognizing the need to really devote our time and attention to what is the proper pay for a teacher, police officer, firefighter, and sheriff deputy. We're going to hopefully have those results start coming in the summertime, if not the fall. In addition, I'd like to position next year's budget to do a review of all the other employees of the schools and the counties, again, just to make sure we are doing what is right. Those numbers may be large, and it may be numbers that we are not going to necessarily be able to implement in any one year, but we are going to hopefully develop the rightful financial plans to get it done. As a good faith effort of that, for the next year's budget, we have $2.5 million set aside for a reserve for the implementation of such pay studies. We don't have to be the traditional government. If those studies come in mid-year and we can deploy some mid-year salary increases to those targeted professions, we will do so. Our 5-year financial plan has also put away $2.5 million in FY2022, again, to recognize the value of our workforce and the investment that's possibly needed to give to that. So again, while the merit increase is only 2%, with the career development programs and these reserves for pay study implementations, again, that's an addition to the 2% base that's already out there. The last thing as far as the workforce of interest is that we're recognizing the challenges with the part-time workforce. This organization grew in many part-time positions during the recession, no different than most other entities that cut the full-time costs and deployed a part-time workforce that was willing to work, quite frankly, for lesser pay, lesser benefits. Those days are not as easy to come by anymore. Everybody wants more pay, everybody wants more benefits. So we're starting to transition those vacant part-time positions and leverage them into singular full-time positions. Generally, the math can work out as if you take 2 part-time people, create 1 full-time position, you're almost break even with that. From the customer service standpoint, a couple departments just to highlight on, and these are just a couple of examples. You're going to have a whole budget document of hundreds of pages and lots of narrative, all the things we're doing, but these are just simple examples of how we're just trying to approach each day as a new day and serving the people. Our Citizen Information and Resource Department, that's sort of a catch-all of the front lines of trying to work with people that aren't necessarily in other defined areas of our organization: youth, aging, disabled, multicultural. And actually, this is an organization now, a department that's going to be the primary contact for GRTC as we're expanding that bus service, transit service down the Route 1 corridor. The Registrar's Office, early voting, absentee voting requirements have changed, and the efforts and labor and equipment that you need to be responsive to such changes are needed, so we're hiring additional staff in that particular office. We're also continually look at the planning department and the org structure of that to make it operate in the most efficient manner. We created a department a few years ago of community enhancement, and virtually all of our code compliance, code enforcement, these are the field people that respond to citizen complaints of what may be wrong on a person's property. There were some remnant positions that were left in planning. We're now bringing those remnant positions so they're all under one roof in community enhancement. We also had sort of a multifaceted way in which we dealt with juvenile justice type services. It was in 3 or 4 different types of departments. So what we're doing is we're combining them under the leadership of Marilyn Brown, who is our current juvenile detention director. And with that, you'll have the Child Advocacy Center and you'll have juvenile probation all become part of that one department now called Juvenile Justice. Cooperative extension, here's an out-of-the-box way of thinking. A great state, local relationship, partnership. We've had challenges in the past when we've had vacant state positions that we weren't able to perform the services in this low employee numbered department. They needed a home department with a bigger bench strength, more people and that rightful department is Parks and Recreation. They share a lot of the same missions and visions in serving the people in the field. And so what we're doing is we're just going to have cooperative extension become a division under Parks and Recreation. Real property. We in Chesterfield County have right-of-way acquisitions all the time for utilities and transportation. We've had a division under utilities that has done that for many years, and it's been called upon also to do site acquisition for schools, libraries, parks, fire stations, other projects that we need. They were also called upon to dispose of properties that we once had that needed to go back into the private or nonprofit use. Just to make it clear and just have a point of identification and not get confused with right-of-way practices, we actually are creating a department of one, a real property director. That will be reportable to a deputy county administrator for the acquisition of all property, the disposal of all surplus lands, and the management of all lease agreements to make sure that we are doing everything right all the time. And again, as that department evolves, as the needs evolve, it may expand in more people, but we think we can start with the one vacant position, if you will, from the old right-of-way division. The last thing I have is just a goodwill example of how the county and schools get along quite well. There's about 30 services we do in a consolidated or collaborative manner. We even have a website dedicated to that. I think it's called Collaborative Services. What we are doing is recognizing that our print shop and the school's print shop don't need to be two separate print shops. And in this particular case, I'll give the schools credit. They are much more into the production business than we are currently right now, as we do many more things online or outsourced. So we're going to turn our keys over to the schools to manage the overall county and school print shop. Those cost efficiencies and reduce equipment costs and streamline services should, again, only help serve both of us better. As picking up into infrastructure, you always have to maintain your infrastructure. You always have to try and build your infrastructure and facilities commensurate with the demands of the people and what's in front of you at the service levels you want to try and do it at, particularly in schools and public safety. So there's a two-part referendum. One is the county side, one is the school side. For the school side, we have a $200 million referendum that addresses the critical needs and ongoing care of our facilities. It's mostly in public safety projects and quality of life projects for parks and rec, libraries, community revitalization, major maintenance, and transportation. It proposes to replace or renovate aging facilities that no longer meet service demands or provide new fire stations or new parks to meet new service demands. In addition, for the first time, we're going to include police precincts in such referendum. Previously, we had rented and leased all of our police precincts. We're not going anywhere in the police precinct business. Therefore, it makes business sense to be in the ownership role and, quite frankly, putting these police precincts in strategic spots throughout the county to best serve the people. The schools portion of the referendum is $400 million. It seeks to address its current major maintenance backlog, enrollment growth with additional learning space via schools, and aging infrastructure. It proposes 3 new schools, 5 school rebuilds, and more efficient use of existing space than a new $100 million high school through adding high school capacity at CTC Hall and potential high school student daytime use at John Tyler Community College. These are projects that Superintendent Doherty, myself, and our staffs have worked together on for months in trying to perfect. With that said, we are actually in the business and in the search for a new consolidated school headquarters that will free up the space at CTC Hall so we can turn that rightfully back into a high school and not necessarily into a half high school, half administrative facility. So while the proposed referendum is mostly defined and the path to fully fund the debt service is covered at least in the 5-year plan, as far as the speed by which we do the projects, the scope by which we do the projects, we're going to have some discussions on that. So right now, the referendum is proposed to be done at the existing property rates we have with no new taxes. However, the speed at which the projects can be built will be a discussion post-adoption, because if there was a $20 million meals tax as part of the referendum or part of any processes, we need to have that discussion in light of and with all the other news we're receiving of these pay studies of teacher, police, firefighter, and sheriff deputy, as well as, quite frankly, when can you collect a new tax revenue and consider ways to reduce the existing property tax rate. which is the highest, quite frankly, amongst our competitive peers in the region. The other thing is, with the surrounding localities of 6 around us all having a meals tax, all having a success with the meals tax, without any adverse impacts to businesses that I've ever seen documented, again, it's just worthy of the conversation. But that conversation is going to happen after the state is done with its budget and when we can deliberate our adopted budget and any other implementation strategies and maybe preliminary estimates of what might be pay study impacts. Lastly, the 5-year CIP includes $10 million for transportation projects. For the most part, local funding for transportation projects is done through our vehicle registration fee. However, the state is considering the creation of a new regional sales tax that will provide a significant additional funding source for transportation. Because that's funding is not necessarily secured in an adopted budget yet, nor signed by the governor's office, we are not recognizing that tax revenue in our budget. We would like to think that if it has closure to it by the time we adopt our budget, we will be amending our budget. But let me be perfectly clear, this new transportation tax revenue is not new revenues we can get into our budget to then fund other parts of our budget that have shortfalls. The dedicated and legal nature of how this tax is to be spent are, quite frankly, for projects we do not have in our budget. It's to meet our unfunded road project list, which last time I saw it was over $2 billion. So again, while it's a modest revenue source and a much welcomed revenue source, by no means is it going to be exhausting a $2 billion road project list anytime soon. So having said that, I know I just went through many minutes of different parts of our budget. I would like to recognize Matt Harris, Deputy County Administrator, and Andrea Peaks here to my left, who's our Budget Director. And again, if they have any statements they're willing to make or be responsive to any questions, that's the closure of my remarks, and I thank you for your time and attention.
No, I think Dr. Casey summed it up well. I think the key thing that I would add into this conversation today is everything that County Administrator just laid out really is according to the plan that we put in place a year ago for fiscal year 2021. So there really, in the grand scheme of things, there aren't a lot of surprises. It's a pretty boring transition, if you will, from one budget year to the next. A lot of the compensation topics that were referenced really are out-year discussions, and that's been the nature of our planning here in Chesterfield County, is we spend as much or more time in future year budgets and trying to set that framework in place so that when we're in this room next year, ideally I could sketch out his notes, what he would be saying 12 months from now if we do our jobs right. That's the way we try to approach it. But I think, the headline for me in terms of this budget really is the dollars are absolutely concentrated in core service areas. Almost 85% of every new dollar in this plan is going to education and public safety. The capital piece is really our other major area that we pay attention to, and that's really being handled via the referendum that Dr. Casey just rolled through there. So at 85, we're already spending the better part of 80% overall in those areas, but we have intensified, doubled down, if you will, in those areas for the fiscal 2021 budget. And we're able to do that, again, because we keep our administrative overhead costs very, very low. We only spend, on average, about 7 cents out of every dollar to do all of the support functions that stretch across and underpin all of those areas, all those frontline services. So we try to keep that part of the budget in check as much as possible.